So let's jump right into what it is that I bring to any cEDH event. Larger tournaments, of course, I'm going to bring water, snacks, probably Advil, that kind of stuff. But separate from that, as far as just to actually play the game, here's kind of the main setup that I have. So we'll start here with, my commander. These are some pretty awesome artist proofs that I had done. These are the sketches on the back of Ral in the Sonoran Desert with the cacti, monsoon, and everything going on in the background. I have to show these off. They're just so beautiful. Really, really appreciate Borja, the artist, for their amazing work on these sketches. So I bring these, and I also have an official tournament legal copy of RAL as well. I bring my tournament tokens box. It has all kinds of different tokens, plus some makeshift sticker tokens that I have. I usually forget this, but I try to bring some sort of D20. This is, of course, a spin down, which isn't technically randomized. So somebody might give you a hard time about that, and rightfully so. You definitely want to have an actual D20 when it comes to rolling for the stickers for the name sticker goblin or mind goblin. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And then outside of those tokens, I have the actual deck itself. Right now I'm rocking single sleeves. Here's Ral. I keep it in a clear sleeve because it's much easier to show front and back when people have questions. I present this, and then we've got the deck itself with lots of white bordery goodness. I'm about 40% of the way through the list right now. So this is kind of the full setup that I've got each time that I go into a tournament. So let's talk a little bit about how I would start the actual game itself. Importantly, this is also super important. In the bottom of my deck box here, I've got the infamous Cheeto die, as well as a spin down, or a life counter. This is it for obvious reasons, right? I love this. It was like an investment that I didn't really want to make, but boy, is it badass. Nice and heavy. It's awesome for counting life or storm, etc. I use it for life. And then I have lots of dice because we have lots of different things to roll for on top of needing to mark counters, etc. So these are the dice that I use, and they almost always fail. I almost always roll to take damage as opposed to flipping around. So I should probably change that up. And then I have this really important little slip of paper that says Lucky on it. This is a luck counter for gemstone caverns, and I just slide this in as the counter for if I ever get gemstone caverns in my opening hand. So that's the main setup there. Now, as far as tokens go, let's take a look at those. Got quite a few tokens, but there's only so many that I actually use on a regular basis. Let me slide these up here. Make a little bit more space. Cool. So these are the sticker tokens that I use to represent the stickers that make different amounts of mana. Got 3s and 4s and 6s and 5s and 4s. So these are basically all of the possible outcomes that you could get from the most optimal 10 stickers that you would reveal before the game. I'm going to put it on screen right now, but here is the sticker sheet that I present before the game on my phone. And I also mentioned to a judge that I'm going to do this. That way they don't think I'm using an electronic device for no reason. You can get around this by just having this printed out, or you can have the 10 actual stickers themselves. You'll notice I actually do have the real stickers, but I just find it to be such a pain in the ass, so I just don't like using them. So I just use this right here, and when I do, before the game, I just have each one of the players roll a d20, and then whatever the corresponding number is, that is this one of the stickers that we'll use. So let's say it's the second one, like, I don't know, let's just see what we roll. We rolled a 2, so that's gonna be the lowest one which is the mind sticker. It's not actually, you don't actually use the word mind, you use the one that represents 3 mana, but it's the worst roll you could get, so it's a 3. And then we just re-roll on any duplicate. So if somebody rolls a 1 or a 2, then we would re-roll. So the next player rolls, and this is it was a 9, and I'm pretty sure that one is a 4. That's how much mana it would produce when it comes into play on the ETB ability. And let's just assume that we rolled, because we're better lucky than good, let's just say we roll a 20. So we hit the 20, and that one represents, I think it's gelatinous. So we get 6 mana. So then these would be the 3. I would put the rest of these away in my token pile, and I would set these actually aside in my game, over below where I have my life counter off to the side. That way it's very clear and well indicated that these are my 3 stickers for the game. The one represents 3 mana, 4 mana, and 6 mana. You don't have to do it this way. This makes it more clear to your opponents how much mana you have access to when you play that card. The ETB happens, and then you put the sticker onto it, and you make that much mana. You don't have to do this. You could actually have the token itself. For example, here's one. So you could have this token, and then they would need to basically do the math on their own to figure out how much mana this would represent. So that's just a quick rundown about stickers. So those are some of the tokens there. And then as far as the rest of the tokens that I actually end up using on a regular basis, I want to give a huge shout out to these super badass tokens that I've got here. So first of all, this is a gold saber-tooth dockside treasure token that is just, basically as sick as they come. I love this treasure token so much. And then all these tokens are digital cyclone tokens. Digital Cyclone is actually a local friend of mine, but they do shipping all over, and their token packs are super affordable and super sick. I love this like old school vibe. It reminds me of like Pleasantville or something like that.
All right, it's me from the future here. Just wanted to give a huge shout out again to Digital Cyclone. Fantastic tokens. They're what I personally use. They were kind enough after I recorded this to actually put up a coupon code, which I'll have here on screen. It's all one word. It's Holden Prio, and you'll get 10% off everything in their shop. That's not just their token packs, which are fantastic, but also play mats, etc., all the other cool stuff that's there. So here's a QR code on screen, as well as the URL will be down in the description below, and go check out their fantastic work. They're not paying me for this. They didn't give me anything free for this. I actually just used their product, reached out to them, and they were kind enough to give everybody who's watching a 10% off discount. So use that coupon code and enjoy.
Badass tokens that I've got here. So first of all, this is a gold saber-tooth dockside treasure token that is just, basically as sick as they come. I love this treasure token so much. And then all these tokens are Digital Cyclone tokens. Digital Cyclone is actually a local friend of mine, but they do shipping all over, and their token packs are super affordable and super sick. I love this like old school vibe. It reminds me of like Pleasantville or something like that. They say they're bitching on the back. So for example, here's a trigger token. So we use these to like announce that you've got a Bergie trigger or a Stormkiln Artist trigger, etc. You can put these on the stack. And then, of course, we're going to use the red mana, which double-sided on the back has a treasure token on it. So we're going to use the red mana token to represent the mana in our pool. We've got a blue mana, and these are just so crispy, and they just look awesome. And then, of course, colorless mana. So these are the main tokens that I end up using right here. In addition to that, I've also got this trigger token, which is meant for Krark flips, but I actually just kind of like using it for Ral as well, because we're also flipping for Ral. So I use a different set of trigger tokens for Ral itself than I do for anything else. That way, when we're in the stack, it's very easy for anybody else who's watching, or a judge, if they get called over, to look through the stack for me to be able to identify, yeah, these are the tokens for Ral flips, or for the triggers for Ral flips, and then these are the trigger tokens as they represent for like Bergie making mana, or Stormkiln Artist, or whatever other triggers might be happening, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, etc. Those are the majority of the tokens that I use. Here's some more examples of these awesome digital cyclone tokens. These are great. They say visit the zoo. These are for like Swan Song, etc. Just so sick. I'll put a link in the description below for Digital Cyclone. Please check them out and support them. I could be wrong, but I want to say they're like $30 or less for like a huge pack of tokens, and you get all of these ones I'm showing you here. I really like this copy, this foil copy token. I sometimes end up using it if there's like weird situations that come up and I need to represent multiple copies on the stack using reiterate, etc. So I like using this one. And here's in the unfortunate case of if you end up getting Gilded Draked. This is mostly just used for online play because you don't have a physical Gilded Drake to put in. You just use this to represent it. So yeah, those are the main tokens that I end up using the majority of the time. I'm currently working towards having a full set of Storm Crows to represent Storm, but right now I only have like about 15 of them or so, which isn't, normally Storm gets a lot higher than this, but one day I'll have Storm Crows to represent all of my Storm. Okay, so let's, I'm gonna leave some of these aside. Now that you've seen the way that we have kind of the basic setup of what I bring to the table when I play, it might look like a lot, but in reality, it's just this deck box here, my play mat, and then this deck box here, because this has, as a reminder, inside of it, it has my life as well as my tokens. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into some of the physical dexterity sides of how to actually play through and order your triggers on the stack and how to represent things with the table itself. Okay, so let's walk through an example of how I set up my board and how I keep track of all of these triggers as I'm actually playing through the game. So off to the left-hand side of the board, I'm gonna keep my trigger tokens, my mana tokens, treasure, etc. I also keep my dice on to the right of my deck or just below my deck open and available, just because it just seems like it comes up so often. And then the rest of the tokens I normally keep above that dice. So you can't really see here in this setup, but it's off to the right-hand side of my mat, up above. I'll keep all of the tokens themselves, these ones, as well as all of the dice that I'm gonna need over here. In addition to that, I'm gonna keep my commander off to the right-hand side of my deck, off the table, just so that it's very clear whether it's in play or not. I know some people prefer to do this kind of move. That's not really my preference, but it's, obviously no big deal, not super relevant here. So in this situation, I also keep my life above my commander off to the right-hand side. So let's just, for the sake of this video, let's just use this setup that we have here to make it super clear. So let's just go through an example of what a starting board state might look like. So before starting the game and before doing any sort of cutting for mulligans, any of that kind of stuff, I present the sticker sheet that we talked about. I have each player roll for it, re-rolling on duplicates, and then I set those allotted stickers off to the side underneath my commander. That way it's very clear, and I remove the rest of the sheets that I have and put it into my token boulder that I have, that little deck box. So let's start with an opening 7. And we'll just show an example kind of how this would work in a real game. So here we have Bloodstained Mire, Snap, Helm of Awakening, Gutshot, Arid Mesa, for the record, these are both white bordered, Shatter Skull Smashing, also white bordered, and Burgie. Oh, this will work out to be a good example because we can also show what it's like with the Burgie triggers. So I don't know that I would necessarily keep this hand. As a reminder, I'm on 17 untapped lands in this deck, and somehow I always just seem to draw them. It's absolutely insane. But let's just assume that we did keep this. I don't know that I would, but let's just assume that we did. So we'll start the game. We'll check to see if anyone has pre-game actions. We'll go in order for those. Also, when mulliganing, let's just assume I'm in seat 4. I would not go to my second 7 until seats 1, 2, and 3 have resolved their first mulligan, because technically that is the correct way to do this. And I know it might seem super nitpicky and like it doesn't really matter, and it takes up a bunch of extra time, but what it does is it establishes very, very early in the game that you are going to be following actual rules, you are going to be tracking priority, you are going to be tracking triggers, and you're a bit of a stickler about that. And that doesn't mean that you're doing it to be annoying. It just means that you want to be very clear and concise about it. And I don't do it in a rude way. I'm not like, no, I'm not going to resolve my mulligan until you resolve your mulligan. I just tell them, like, I prefer to just keep things in the way that follows the rules of the game. That way there's no mishaps later on down the road. And I just do it in a way that's like pretty friendly. Just because I find that it makes things much easier later when you're announcing all of your triggers, holding priority, passing priority, etc., for people to not get confused or try to claim that you passed priority or didn't, because all along the way we've been very, very concise about the way that we've been doing things. And so just, I think setting off that kind of setting that standard early is really, really important in the game. So we kept this first 7. Let's just assume everyone else went around and they did their mulligans, etc. We say we're keeping our 7. Then we go to, okay, everyone's kept their hands that they want. Pre-game actions, I have no pre-game actions. Awesome, we'll start. So seat 1 goes and plays, seat 2 plays, seat 3 plays, and on the way to the end step, and this might seem annoying also, but on each person's end step, I'll just say, hey, no effects in end step. And the reason why this matters is if they have more than 7 cards, what some people can do, and I don't see it happen a lot, but it can happen, is if, let's say they had 8 cards in hand, so they're gonna have to discard in their cleanup phase. Well, what they'll say is, I'm gonna go to pass my turn, and then they'll tell the table which card, like, okay, I'm gonna discard this card, I'm gonna discard this birdie because, to hand size. But if they never actually check to see if everyone passed priority in end step, someone could technically have an effect in end step and use that information that they just gained as a way to kind of angle shoot and say, like, oh, well, now that I know that they're discarding a card like that, I'm going to tutor for a card like this in their end step. And because they never check to see if everyone passed priority in the end step, you can't really, you kind of like priority bullied without meaning to through the end step, going to clean up too fast. So on my end step and on other people's end step, I say any effects on end step, and then if everyone passes, there is no more time for anyone to respond, with exceptions. I know, like if you had a necropotence, for example, when you go to discard, there'll be a trigger, and then at that point there's priority, etc. But outside of that, especially in a deck like this, there's not really going to be situations like that come up in our own cleanup. So that just gives you an example. So we go to our turn, and this is how I would actually play the turn out. I would say untap, upkeep, draw. Especially on turn 1, that's usually good enough time. But in other turns where it's very clear that other people have flash enablers or maybe a ranger captain that's on board, etc., in upkeep, I would say, I'm gonna go to draw step. We good? And then I'll say, draw. We good for me to draw? I give them that moment because you never know when someone tries to like walk something back or whatever, and as soon as you reveal this card and see what it is, now the game state changes and maybe what a judge would say is going to change. But if you still haven't looked and it's very clear that this is the card you're going to draw and their hand is separate, this is a good distinction. Now again, these are things that are very nitpicky and small, but I think this is an important thing for a video like this to try to explain. So we draw for turn, we're in draw step still, and it's a lotus petal, which is awesome. Accelerants in this deck are fantastic. We probably are just going to end up going turn 1 Helm of Awakening pass. I say moving to main, and usually nobody's going to have effects in your draw step, but I still say it. I come from 60 card formats, and especially eternal ones like Legacy and Pauper and Vintage and Modern, etc., where there are weird things people can do in your upkeep and draw step. So here, we crack a fetch, and especially on turn 1, I'll ask the table, are we good if I shortcut this fetch? I'm going to get a volcanic island. And I take the life, the fetch is now in my graveyard, and I'm asking if we're good to shortcut. And then I'm going to shuffle once I've done the rest of my stuff for turn. That way we can try to keep a decent pace of game. Just because I'm being nitpicky doesn't mean that I don't want to keep a good pace of game. I do. What I don't want to have happen is going to time and having these long drawn out slog battles, because we're a non-deterministic storm deck and our turns can end up taking 30 minutes sometimes if they're really crazy and we have to fight through a bunch of interaction, etc. So it's very important to try to keep things moving along. So in this situation, I wouldn't show the lotus petal yet. I would say I'm fetching. It does my fetch resolve? And then if they say yes, then I would say, cool, I'm going to get a volcanic island. Are we okay if we shortcut this? That way we can try to move things along, and I'll shuffle afterwards. And if the table says no, no big deal. Go grab the Volk, shuffle, do it appropriately. But if they say yes, say, okay, great, I'm getting a volcanic island. And this is an important point to make. Anytime someone tries to shortcut an action, especially like a tutor, like a vamp tutor or whatever, it's important to note that like with a vamp tutor, that's a hard one to shortcut if they're just doing it to save time, because while they're finding it, there's no way to prove to the table that that's the card that they had in mind. And let's say someone else goes to their turn while they're still trying to find it. That other player might like play, I can't think of a great example, but like play a basic, and let's say they were going to tutor for a Blood Moon, but now they don't tutor for a Blood Moon because someone has a basic. I know nobody plays Blood Moon, but like I'm just using this as an example. That situation is a reason why with tutors that you don't have to reveal the information at the table, I don't pass on those unless the person grabs a card, sets it aside and says, this is the card 100% I'm getting, we can move on. Then if they try to then take that back and get a different card, I would tell them to pause and would call a judge immediately, because they're making a different choice of their tutor now based off new information. But if it's a tutor like a mystical tutor or a worldly tutor or a fetch land, one where you have to reveal to the table the card you're getting and it has to fit certain qualifications for that reason, you can just ask, okay, what are you getting? And if they can tell you clearly and say it out loud and the whole table hears it, say, okay, I'm good to pass on that if that's the card you're getting. Like, for example, I'm saying I'm getting Volcanic Island, and if the table says cool, and then I play another spell and this resolves, and then when I go to fetch, I'm like, you know what, actually, I'm going to get the steam vents. No. You should call a judge if you ever see somebody do that. You can't like walk back things you've tutored for that you've already shortcutted. Anyways, that's a lot said about a small topic, but I think it's pretty important. So if they let that happen, we say I'm getting a Volk, and I'm going to cast this Lotus Petal. Does Lotus Petal resolve? I'm passing priority on it. Priority. Awesome. Lotus Petal's good. I'm going to crack the Lotus Petal and cast Helm of Awakening, tapping the Volcanic Island. Lotus Petal's in the graveyard. I pass priority on this. Does it resolve? Priority. And if it resolves, I'm going to pass the turn. Now, what's important to note is just from like a gameplay perspective in RAL, some of the things that I like to tell people, especially when they see something scary like this, like I tell them, I've already played my land for turn, and I've played the only rock that I have in hand for turn. If this resolves, I'm passing the turn. There's nothing else coming out of here. I'm not going to like somehow figure out how to go like Simeon Spirit Guide ritual and like pop off from here. I'm just passing the turn. Sometimes that puts people at ease that they're, okay, cool, that resolves. So let's just assume that resolves, and then the table goes on to their turn. And at my end step, I would say, I'm passing the turn. Does anyone have effects in end step? And assuming that nobody has effects in end step, then we're good to go to the next person's turn. Cool. So there's the Volk. I'm going to shuffle. I always present, after I shuffle, I normally do a riffle shuffle, but I'm not going to do it right now because I'm kind of tight on space physically here. So I'll just do like a very basic shuffle here. I always present for cut, and if someone doesn't cut, then I present it to another person to cut. What I don't want to have happen is for like player in seat 2 to claim that like me and seat 1 know each other, and so they just tapped and they should have cut. Like, I don't know, that stuff gets sketchy to me. I don't want to take any risks. So if I give it to seat 1 and seat 1's like, you're good, I'll look at seat 2 and be like, can you cut? Because I want it fully randomized. There's too much cheating in Magic, and I don't want anyone to try to like claim anything weird, that I did something weird, or me and another player are like colluding, or any of that BS. I want to actually make sure that there's no issues. So they cut and they pass back to me. We set it over here. And let's say we make it all the way around to player 3. In their end step, I say no effects in end step. Okay, cool. We'll untap. Upkeep. Am I good to go to draw? Okay. Draw step. Am I good to draw the card? Yep, still. And I know this seems weird because I've already gone to draw step. I just don't want anyone to say that I like bullied them through a phase. So we draw for turn. Wow, we drew a Stormkiln Artist. That is a sick Magic card. Here, I think given the situation, I definitely just want to fetch again. So here, I would crack the fetch, paying the life, and ask if fetch resolves. If fetch resolves, I'm going to go get a Steam Vents. And because there's multiple other plays I'm going to be making this turn, I guess none of them are going to probably draw me cards. so none of them are actually relevant. So I'm just going to say, are we good if I get a steam vents untapped? And we'll do the same thing we did last turn. We'll shock it in, and I'll get it afterwards, but just for the sake of time. If the table's cool with that, we get the steam vents, we shock it in, and we're down to 36. And here, I probably, in this situation, I don't know. There's lots of different ways you could go about doing this. I think because we're choked on blue mana more than anything like that, if we try to play it, like what I'm thinking is like, well, what if we just play out Bergie for 2 and then gut shot making a red, which then gives us the ability to play Ral as well, because as a reminder, we have Helm of Awakening. The thing that doesn't do is it doesn't let us keep Snap. And so if we do it the other way, where we go Snap, because as a reminder, we have 2 lands in play and this only costs 1, we float a mana, and then we untap those 2, and we now have 3. That means that we can then go Stormkiln Artist, Gut Shot, which now gives you a treasure, or you can even hold up the Gut Shot, or you could go Bergie into Ral, making a red. I'm just thinking, like, what would you do with 3 mana? Bergie for 2, Ral for 1, which then triggers and makes you a red, and then you could Gut Shot on top of that to make another red. I mean, you're kind of in the same situation either way. The only difference is you have opportunity to flip Ral. Another thing we could start considering doing is the backside of Bergie, because obviously our hand has a lot of ways to make mana, but what it doesn't have is card draw. And so we have the ability to play Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. So if we go that route, we got to remember that that's going to cost us 4 mana because there's a Helm in play. So is there any way that we can get up to 4 mana? So like, let's say we went Ral first, Snap with Ral, that's still only 2 mana. If we just Snap first, that's 3 mana. If we, yeah, there's no other way we could sequence this to be able to like get up to the amount of mana that we need. So I think given all of that, and because of how powerful Stormkiln Artist is, I think I would actually play Stormkiln Artist here. So I would do the snap trick. So we snap, so let's just walk through it. So we have the Steam Vents and Volk. I would tap them both, and I would represent to the table that I'm floating a singular red mana, and I normally just keep a die on it all the time when I'm using that. So with the 2 lands floating, you know, for the sake of this, I'm just going to grab the Steam Vents. That way it's not as confusing. Where's that white bordered Steam Vents? I know it's in here. Come out and play. Okay. Sorry. There's a little Patrick Star popping through. I couldn't help it. I'm sure it's at the bottom of the deck now, of course. Wow. Did I just pass it? Am I losing my mind? Yeah, I did. Cool. All right. So there's the Steam Vents. I'll just give this like the world's worst shuffle real quick. You present it to somebody, they cut, and here we go. So we'll tap the 2 using a blue from one of them and then floating a red. We'll cast Snap on someone's creature, assuming that they have a creature. And then I'll look at the table and say, does this resolve? And this is where you might need to have a conversation with the table and say, listen, I'm not storming off this turn. There's a world where I'm probably just casting one other instant or sorcery and it's not a wheel effect. This is just me trying to like actually build a board and be able to play this game. I didn't keep like a super explosive hand that has, you know, wheel and Jessica's Will and all this bonus round crazy stuff. And they can either believe you or not, but it's true. I mean, our hand isn't super explosive. It makes a bunch of mana, but it doesn't do anything this turn. So we snap, assuming this resolves. We untap these. I put it into my graveyard here. And also, this is of note, I keep my graveyard like this, and as it gets full, I will continuously line it up in order. And then exiled cards, I angle them sideways like this, like assuming this is permanently exiled, it's sideways. And then exiled until end of turn, I keep up here partially off my playmat so that it's clear that this is separate from the stuff I'm doing down here. Also, I keep my lands in the back, keep artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, etc. in the middle, and then or babbles, I guess. And then at the top, I keep creatures. That way there's no confusion about board state, about what's available and what isn't. And these tokens and treasures and all that, treasures would be in the middle spot, but the tokens that represent mana are usually off to the side here. So assuming this all resolves, I'm then going to use this mana and tap these 2 lands for red, red, blue, blue, purple, purple, doesn't matter, and cast this Stormkiln Artist. There's a chance this gets Force of Willed, who cares? But if it doesn't, and this resolves, because it is a creature after all, so it's harder to deal with, I think I probably would gut shot here, paying 2 life. So we pay 2 life, and here is where we have a trigger on top of the Stormkiln Artist. So I have priority on the gut shot, then a trigger happens and I have priority on the trigger. So I would aim this at something and the trigger goes on the stack, I announce the trigger, and then I look at the table and say, I'm passing priority on the Stormkiln Artist trigger, do you pass? On seat 1. And now it's very clear who has priority and who is holding up the clock. It's not me if somebody else is thinking a long time or whatever. As soon as they pass, I ask, again, we go to player 2, you good on the Stormkiln trigger? Player 3, you good on Stormkiln trigger? Once they say yes, there is nothing else that can possibly happen. I can't respond to it. The trigger resolves, I get a treasure token. Now I have priority on gut shot. And this is where it's super important that if this player immediately says, yeah, and I pass on gut shot as well, I make sure to stop them and say, I have priority. I'm going to pass priority on this to you. It sounds like you're passing on it. Now, why does this matter? In this moment, it doesn't. But assuming in another situation, we have a spell we want to counter, if we let them pass priority on it and essentially, like, for lack of a better term, like priority bully us, kind of, we can't counter the spell if the rest of the table passes priority. We don't get a chance at the end. We have to hold priority, hence the name. So I say I pass on gut shot, they pass, cool. The gut shot resolves, and then I let them know that I'm going to put a Ral Monsoon Mage on the stack. Now, the reason why I would sequence it this way is because now I have a treasure and I have 2 lands, possibly a third. I have Ral and I have Stormkiln Artist in play. So no matter what they remove, I'm actually still in a pretty decent spot. And as a reminder, I'm going to cast, I'm not going to have the treasure, pardon me, I'm going to crack it. So crack the treasure as part of the cost. We put Ral on the stack and I say I'm passing priority. If the table lets it pass, it resolves. And I'm doing this because I have Helm. That's why it only costs a single red. So and as a reminder, what we have left in hand is Burgi/Harnfell and a land/sorcery. Okay. So we're going to pass the turn. We do the same thing. We go to the next player's end step, and in their end step, I say, no effects in end step. We good? Okay. Now we're untapping. We good in upkeep? Awesome. We good to draw? Draw good? Okay. We draw. We draw more mana. Geez, a Tavern Scoundrel. Normally these cards aren't bad to draw. It's just this is a lot of mana. Okay. So here, this is where things get a little bit interesting. So we still want the backside of Burgi because we need something that represents cards. As a reminder, we just snap kept this hand. I probably would have kept any 7 that had a land in it just so I could show off the different triggers, etc. But for the sake of this whole argument and situation, let's just say that this is also in play. This Burgi is also in play because I want to be able to show off the physical dexterity side of triggers. These are the cards in my hand, so we'll set these off to the side. So assume we put any spell on the stack. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's just take these spells out of my graveyard and just pretend they were back in my hand. So like Snap and Gut Shot. So this is where, from a sequencing standpoint, I would put a sorcery on the stack to start. When the sorcery goes on the stack, how many triggers am I going to have? 3. I'm going to have a Ral trigger, Stormkiln Artist trigger, and a Burgi trigger. Now it's really important that we represent these triggers in a very clear and understandable way. So normally we don't have this many triggers, but it is possible. So this is my Ral trigger, and I'm going to put this one on the bottom. On top of all of that, I'm going to put my Stormkiln Artist trigger and my Burgi trigger. And I'm going to order them so that my Stormkiln Artist trigger is last on the stack and therefore first to resolve. So put these 2 triggers here. You can also represent them in a different way if you prefer. Sometimes I do it like this, where this represents the Burgi trigger, like with the red mana, because it makes red mana. So we'll put it there. And then this is the Stormkiln Artist trigger. So now this is the stack with the spell underneath all of this. okay? And I have priority on all of these triggers and the spell when it comes time to resolve each one of them. And now this is where things can get a little bit tricky. So if people start responding, we now have the ability to cast more spells on top of them and letting this same stack of triggers happen again. So we go to gut shot on top of it, we then layer the 3 triggers again, and then we snap on top of that, we layer the 3 triggers again, and we resolve the stack all the way down. And what's an interesting thing about all of this that maybe isn't super clear at first is that while all of this is happening, mentally, I'm tracking Ral Storm, which is number of instants and sorceries that have been cast for turn. So in this situation we're talking about, it would be 3. And I'm not physically tracking it on the table. I'm mentally tracking it until it gets close to 6. And until it's clear I'm going to storm off for the turn. The other thing I'm tracking is what is the difference between Ral Storm and regular Storm. So because I've actually cast Birdy for turn, the difference is 1. And then let's say someone counterspells also in between somewhere on the stack. Now it is 2. So this means that my Ral Storm is 3 instants or sorceries, and then Storm other than Ral, which would be an opponent's counterspell of some sort, pact, negation, whatever, and our Birdy is now 2. What this means is that I can very clearly immediately tell what total Storm is and what my Ral Storm number is. Mentally, I track it this way. It's much easier for me than trying to say, okay, my total Storm is 5, but my Ral Storm is 3. It's like, no. Ral Storm is 3, and also additional Storm is however many other things. And it's very, at least for me, that's a good way for me to track it. Now here, I'm doing this mentally, but once the stack starts getting too crazy, or if we get to a point where we're actually getting close to the 6th spell, where we're gonna have the ability to flip Ral over to the Planeswalker side and be able to try to hit that ultimate of exiling the top 8 cards of our library and casting all instants and sorceries for free this turn, that's when I would actually physically represent Ral Storm on the table with a die off to the side, and then Storm other than Ral next to it. Another thing that I really like that I've seen people do is use a life counter like this to track Storm itself, because it's very easy to keep track of. I just don't have multiple of these, and this method is working pretty good for me. Another thing of note, when we go to actually resolve the Ral triggers, assuming there's all these copies on the stack, multiple Ral triggers, it retroactively looks back to see how many instants and sorceries have been cast for turn. So as you can see here, hopefully this gets picked up on camera, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Ral Monsoon Mage deals 1 damage to you. If you win the flip, you may exile Ral. If you do, return to the battlefield, transform it under your owner's control. So that's all that happens with the trigger itself. What's important though is that on the back side here, it says that Ral enters the battlefield with an additional loyalty counter on him for each instant and sorcery spell you've cast this turn. It doesn't actually track like the individual spell or whatever. It just looks and says how many instants and sorceries have been cast this turn. So what that means is that the very first Ral trigger that's on the stack, if you never let it resolve and you end up casting 5 more instants and sorceries, each one of those that then resolves, where you roll a die to see if you flip or not, when you then lose, let's say you lose 5 of those in a row, you take 5 damage. But let's say you just happen to win one of them, then when you flip Ral then checks on the backside and says, oh, you've cast 6 instants or sorceries this turn. So we're gonna enter with 2 plus 6, which is 8, which is enough to ult. The same is true for every single trigger all the way down. And this is why it's so important that if you can, to stack the triggers so that by the time they resolve, you have a higher chance of flipping at a 6+ number. Now, the flip side of that coin, no pun intended, is also very valid and reasonable, which is that if you have all these triggers on the stack, when Ral flips and you have spells, etc., there's a moment there where someone could like flash in a Bowmasters and deal 1 point of damage to Ral, and because Planeswalker loyalty abilities for the most part are sorcery speed, you can't you can't do anything other than to counterspell that or swat it or whatever. If it takes the damage or if it gets bolted or whatever or removed, you're not going to have an opportunity to actually ultimate Ral. So if the stack is super crazy, that's something else that's of note, that because of the ordering, as soon as one of those triggers resolves and it's positive for you, and you want to flip RAL, you flip it, but then the rest of the stack is still happening. You don't have a chance to ultimate RAL in that moment. So that's just an important thing to think about. Trying to think of anything else that's super relevant here. Also, Storm Kill an Artist is super important to remember that if you put a spell on the stack that has Storm, so let's say Grape Shot is a good example. Let's say you put a Grape Shot on the stack, there's going to be more than one trigger happening here, right? So what's going to happen? You put a Grape Shot on the stack, which says deal 1 damage to any target, Storm, and it's a sorcery. So you put this on the stack. Storm Kill an Artist has Magecraft. Anytime you cast or, very important, copy an instant or sorcery spell, make a treasure token. So that's its own trigger. So what are the two triggers that happen here right now? Just forget about Bergie, forget about Ralph. If you just had Storm Kill an Artist in play, the two triggers are the trigger from Storm Kill an Artist to make a treasure, and the trigger for Storm itself. Storm is a trigger that can be responded to before ever declaring what the copies are aimed at or how many copies you get. Now, why does this matter? Because the Storm for turn does not get frozen in time. What this means is that if you put a Grape Shot on the stack, you have a Storm trigger, and you order it this way, where the Storm trigger happens first, or goes on the stack first, which means it resolves last, and the Storm Kill an Artist trigger happens last, which means it resolves first, because you eat it like a stack of pancakes, top down. Once this resolves and you make that treasure, you hold priority on the Storm trigger. Now that you have a blue, maybe now you can cast, I don't know, let's say Remand, and you remand the Grape Shot, countering it and sending it back to your hand. But in doing so, that's going to up the Storm count for turn, and on top of that, make another trigger from Storm Kill an Artist to make a treasure. So now you have another treasure, and then when Storm resolves, it doesn't just see the original Storm trigger. It now looks and sees, oh, there's another spell that's been cast because of Remand. So now all those copies go on the stack, and then each one of those are represented by a trigger from Storm Kill an Artist, effectively making the Remand a ritual for you, because you made one treasure off of it here and it cost you one, and then you made one more because you upped the Storm count, which means it was a ritual in this case. I think that's probably good for now. There's quite a bit more we can go over as it relates to physical dexterity. These stacks can get pretty crazy and out of control, especially when you start dealing with things like bonus round and Twinferno and Reiterate and things like that. So I really think it's worthwhile to physically play these cards out, not just theorycraft them before jumping into a real tournament setting. Even if you just have a friend that's like willing to play solitaire with you and like basically act as like a judge to double check that you're not screwing something up, it's worthwhile, because I've been playing this deck for quite a while, and I've played a lot of Manual Storm decks outside of this deck, in other formats, not just in cEDH, and I will tell you, it is very easy to make a mistake, and the margins here are super, super, super thin, razor thin. If you make a mistake and you miss something, and then all of a sudden when you finally are trying to win and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm off by 1 mana, had I remembered that Bergie trigger, 7 spells ago, or whatever it is, I'd be winning here. Those are moments that stick with you for a long time. So here's where we're at with the deck. I'm really, really loving the current state of the deck. Basically, the only card at this moment for me that's, for lack of a better term, a flex slot is Shreds of Sanity. It's a card that I'm currently testing and that other people in the RAL Discord server are really liking. So I want to make sure I give it a fair shake again. Psychic Theft has been super, super sick. That's been a new addition. And here's the Shreds of Sanity that we're talking about. This is a recursion piece that's pretty powerful. And what's another super fun one, like a recent addition? I guess Quiet Speculation is somewhat recent as well, and that's a card that has just been absolutely busted in all of my testing. It's been really, really fantastic. Oh, it was the top card of the deck. Yeah, cards like Merchant Scroll, Quiet Speculation, these cards have been super, super fun and have been pretty powerful for everything that I've been kind of trying to do with the deck. So that's enough out of me. I will say, it's always awesome to have people check out these videos. Please leave a comment down below if you made it this far. And if you made it this far and you are still here hanging out with me, please comment down below Storm Crow if you can. Pay homage to the Portal Storm Crow right here. Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Keep storming.
Bye-bye.